The river current seized Ayana's ankle like a vengeful spirit, dragging her beneath the churning waters of Devil's Creek. Her ceremonial dress, heavy with beadwork and soaked through, became a death shroud, pulling her toward the rocky bottom. She fought desperately, her lungs burning. But the sacred stones tied to her waist for the purification ritual now anchored her. To doom. Cale Morrison had been tracking wounded deer through the cottonwoods when he heard the splash. Without hesitation, he dove from the bank, his worn leather boots and cotton shirt weighing him down as he cut through the muddy water. His calloused hands found her flailing arms, and with powerful strokes, he hauled her gasping to the shallows. "Easy, now," he whispered, supporting her trembling form as she coughed up creek water, her dark eyes, wide with shock and something else, gratitude mixed with terror, met his pale blue ones. Ayana tried to speak, but only managed broken gasps. The white man's hands were gentle as he helped her sit against a fallen log, his face creased with genuine concern. She had never been this close to one of his kind, had only seen them from afar in the settlement of Copper Ridge. "You hurt anywhere?" Cale asked, his voice rough from years of calling cattle across the plains. She shook her head, water dripping from her long black hair. Now the sacred stones lay scattered on the creek bed, lost forever. Her grandmother would be furious. The purification ceremony ruined, her spirit quest incomplete. "I must return to my people," she managed in halting English. "Learn from the missionary who sometimes visited their village." Cale nodded, understanding more than she expected. He'd learned some Apache words from old Pedro at the trading post. "Your tribe... where?" She pointed toward the mesa, rising like a red giant beyond the pines. The Apache camp lay hidden in its shadow, protected by ancient magic and warrior sentries who would not take kindly to seeing their daughter with a white rancher. "Can you walk?" He stood, extending his hand, the moment her fingers touched his. Both felt a tan electric current that had nothing to do with the storm clouds gathering overhead. Ayana jerked back as if burned, her eyes widening. Among her people, such a touch between unmarried persons carried deep meaning. Thunder rumbled as they made their way through the forest, Cale keeping respectful distance while ensuring she didn't stumble. Neither spoke, but both felt the weight of what had passed between them by the water when they reached the edge of Apache territory. Marked by carved totems and hanging feathers, Ayana turned to him one last time. "Ayana," she said softly, touching her chest. "Cale," he replied, his hand over his heart. She disappeared into the shadows between the trees, leaving him standing at the boundary between two worlds. He watched until the forest swallowed her completely, unaware that hidden eyes had witnessed everything in that saving her life, just bound his fate to hers by laws older than memory. The storm broke as he rode home, lightning illuminating his weathered face. Behind him, drums began to echo from the mesa, carrying news that would change everything. Chief Nalnish's weathered hands gripped his ceremonial staff until his knuckles went white. The council fire cast dancing shadows across his granite features as Ayana knelt before the gathered elders, her head bowed in shame. "You were touched by the white man," Elder Itzal stated, her voice sharp as obsidian. "Touched and saved by him when the spirits of the water called for your life." "I would have drowned, grandmother," Ayana whispered. "He pulled me from death's embrace, and in doing so, bound you to him by the old laws," Nalnish replied heavily. "The debt of life cannot be ignored, daughter. When one saves another from the spirit's claim, they become responsible for that life forever." The other warriors shifted uneasily around the fire. Ayana's betrothed, Kudrik, stood with his arms crossed, fury radiating from his muscled frame. He had been promised her hand since childhood, their union meant to unite two powerful clans. "The White Devil should die for daring to touch what belongs to me," Kurik snarled, his hand moving to his tomahawk. "The white man follows his own laws," Elder Itzel said, raising her hand for silence. "But the spirits follow older ones. The life debt must be honored, or calamity will fall upon our people." Meanwhile, 3 miles away in Copper Ridge, Cale sat at Murphy's saloon, staring into his whiskey while his best friend Tobias rambled about cattle prices. The amber liquid reminded him of her eyes, deep and mysterious, holding secrets of the desert. "You ain't heard a word I've said," Tobias observed, pushing his hat back. "What's got you so twisted up?" Cale considered telling him about the Apache woman, but what could he say? That touching her hand had felt like lightning, that her face haunted his dreams, that he'd been riding to the mesa's edge every day since, hoping to catch another glimpse of her. "Just tired," he lied, downing the whiskey in one burn. Outside, the autumn wind carried strange sounds, war drums echoing from the heights. The townsfolk paused in their evening routines, listening with nervous ears. Relations with the Apache had been peaceful for months, but drums meant change was coming back. In the village, the ceremony reached its climax. Elder Itzel threw sacred herbs into the fire, sending up columns of aromatic smoke that swirled toward the star-filled sky. "The spirits have spoken," she announced, her voice carrying across the hushed crowd. "The white man who saved our daughter must come before us. If he refuses, we will take her to him. The life debt must be acknowledged." Ayana's heart raced. She thought of Cale's gentle hands, his concerned blue eyes, the way he'd spoken her name like a prayer. Among her people, when a man saved a woman's life, she became his responsibility, his to protect, to provide for, to claim if he chose. And if he accepts the debt, she dared to ask. "Nayas are sad but resolute. Then you belong to him by sacred law, until he releases you or death parts you. No other may claim you, not even one already promised your hand." Kurik roared his displeasure, but the elder's word was final. At dawn, warriors would ride to Copper Ridge with news that would shake both worlds. The Apache woman now belonged to the white rancher, whether he wanted her or not. As the council dispersed, Ayana touched the leather cord around her throat, where she'd hung a small river stona. Memory of the day her life had changed forever. The delegation arrived at Copper Ridge like thunder on a clear morning. Chief Nalnish rode in the center, flanked by 6 painted warriors, their weapons gleaming in the early sunlight. The townspeople scattered like tumbleweeds, slamming shutters and barricading doors as the Apache party proceeded down Main Street. With ceremonial dignity, Cale was shoeing horses at the livery stable when young Billy Henderson came running, his face pale with terror. "Injuns coming, Mr. Morrison. It's a whole war party, and they're asking for you by name." His hammer froze mid-swing. Somehow, he'd known this day would come. Every night since saving her, he'd dreamed of dark eyes and gentle hands, of a connection that transcended the boundaries between their worlds. By the time he reached the town square, crowd had gathered at a safe distance. Sheriff Dalton stood with his hand on his gun, sweat beading his forehead despite the cool morning. "Heir, you Cale Morrison?" Chief Nalnish asked in careful English, his voice carrying the weight of mountains. "I am." The chief dismounted, approaching with measured steps. Behind him, the warriors remained mounted but alert, reading the tension of the white faces surrounding them. "You pulled my daughter from the spirit waters," Nalnish continued. "Ayana of the Wind Clan. You saved her life when the river spirits called her home." Cale nodded slowly. "I couldn't let her drown. By our ancient laws, her life now belongs to you. You are responsible for her until you release this debt or join the spirits yourself." The chief's weathered hand reached into his leather pouch, withdrawing a beaded necklace. "She sent this as proof of her acceptance." The crowd murmured nervously as Cale took the necklace. Recognizing the delicate blue and silver pattern he'd glimpsed on her dress that day by the creek, the beadwork was exquisite, each tiny piece placed with loving care. "What exactly does this mean?" Sheriff Dalton interrupted, his voice tight with anxiety. Elder Itzel, who had ridden with the delegation, answered him. "It means the woman belongs to this man now. She cannot marry another, cannot be claimed by another until he decides her fate." "That's preposterous," Mayor Hutchins blustered, pushing through the crowd. "We don't recognize any heathen marriage laws." The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees as the warriors' hands moved to their weapons. Chief Nalnish raised his hand, and they stilled. But the threat hung in the air like morning mist. "The debt is real, whether you recognize it or not," the chief said calmly. The spirits care nothing for your laws. She will come to you as is proper when the moon is full. 3 days from now, Kale's mind raced. He thought of Ayana's frightened eyes, the way she'd trembled in his arms. The electric touch that had changed something fundamental in his soul. And if I refuse, then you condemn our people to the spirit's wrath and my daughter to a life of shame. No Apache man will ever touch her, knowing she belongs to another. She will die alone and unmarked. The weight of responsibility settled on Kale's shoulders like a heavy blanket. He'd saved her from drowning, but now it seemed he held her entire future in his calloused hands. I need time to think, he said finally. Nalnish nodded gravely. Time is a luxury the spirits rarely grant, but you have until the full moon. Choose wisely, Kale Morrison. A life hangs in the balance. The delegation wheeled their horses around and rode back toward the mesa, leaving the town in stunned silence. Kale stood holding the beaded necklace, feeling its weight like a chain around his heart. That evening, he sat alone on his porch, watching the moon grow fat and bright above the desert. Somewhere out there, an Apache woman waited to learn her fate, and he was the only Aina, sat cross-legged in her family's wickiup, her fingers trembling as she worked glass beads into a pattern older than memory. Each tiny blue stone represented a prayer, each silver thread a hope that the white man would accept the sacred debt between them. Her grandmother, Elder Itzel, watched with knowing eyes. You care for him, she observed, not asking. I barely know him. But even as she spoke the words, Ayana knew they were false. In those moments by the creek, she'd seen into Kale Morrison's soul-seen kindness and strength, loneliness and honor. The spirits had shown her his heart in the space of a heartbeat. The spirits care nothing for time, Itzel replied. Can bloom in an instant or wither over decades. What matters is the recognition. Outside, Kurik's voice carried on the evening wind as he argued with the other young warriors. Been drinking Tiswin, the sacred cactus wine, and his anger grew. With each passing hour, she should be mine by right, he shouted. I will not be shamed by a white dog who knows nothing of our ways. Ayana closed her eyes, knowing that blood would be spilled if Kale rejected the life debt. Kurik's pride would demand satisfaction. An Apache law would be on his side, if not for the older, deeper law that now bound her to the rancher. In Copper Ridge, Kale couldn't sleep. He'd paced his small cabin until he'd worn a path in the wooden floor, the beaded necklace weighing heavy in his hand. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face, not just beautiful, but intelligent and spirited, the way she'd tried to hide. Her fear, the dignity with which she'd accepted his help. Tobias found him at dawn, sitting on the porch with coffee gone cold. Heard about yesterday, his friend said, settling into the other chair. Hell of a thing. Yeah. You gonna do it? Take her as wife? Kale was quiet for a long moment. What kind of life would she have here? The townspeople already look at her like she's some kind of curiosity. And what do I know about Apache ways? What do any of us know about anything when we start? Tobias replied. Mary and I, we fumbled through our first years like blind puppies. But we learned together. That evening, Kale rode out to the boundary stones where he'd last seen her. The moon hung 3/4 full, swollen with promise and threat. It wasn't surprised when she emerged from the shadows between the pines. Moving like a whisper of wind, they stood 10 feet apart, neither speaking. She wore a different dress tonight, white buckskin decorated with silver concos that caught the moonlight. Her hair fell loose around her shoulders like black water. You came, she said softly. Figured we should talk before tomorrow night. She nodded, her eyes never leaving his face. You do not have to accept the debt. I will understand. Happens to you if I don't? Her chin lifted with quiet pride. I survive. I am Apache. But he could see the fear beneath her brave words, the understanding that survival and living were not the same thing. In her world, she would become untouchable, forever marked as belonging to a man who'd rejected her. I'm a simple rancher. He said, I don't know your customs, your language, your gods. Can teach you. The words came out in a rush, then she blushed and looked away. If you wish to learn. Something shifted in his chest, like a lock finding its key. Ayana. She met his eyes again, and in them he saw not just acceptance, but hope. Tomorrow night, he said quietly, I'll be waiting. Her smile was like sunrise over the mountains, transforming her entire face. Without another word, she melted back into the forest, leaving him standing at the crossroads between two worlds, his heart finally certain of the path he would choose. The full moon rose like a great silver coin over the mesa as Ayana prepared for the most important journey of her life. Her mother, Anawa, helped dress her in the ceremonial gown that had been worn by 7 generations of Wind Clan women, white doeskin, soft as clouds, decorated with turquoise and silver that sang softly with each movement. Remember, daughter? Anawa whispered as she braided sacred herbs into Ayana's hair. She'd go not as a captive, but as a woman claiming her destiny. The spirits chose this path for you. Ayana touched the river stone at her throat, her talisman from that fateful day. What if his people reject me? What if I cannot learn their ways? Elder Itzel entered the wickiup, carrying a beautifully carved wooden box. Then you teach them yours, she said firmly. Love is not about becoming someone else, child. It is about becoming more yourself than you ever dreamed possible. The box contained Ayana's dowry turquoise jewelry crafted by her grandmother, silver hair ornaments blessed by the medicine woman, and a knife with a handle carved from sacred cedar. Each piece told the story of her lineage, her worth, her power at the boundary stones. Chief Nalnish waited with a small escort. No weapons tonight. This was a ceremony of peace, of joining rather than conquest. The drums had been silent all day, but now they began their ancient rhythm, carrying news across the desert that the Wind Clan's daughter was going to meet her fate. In Copper Ridge, the saloons had emptied early. Word had spread that the Apache woman would come tonight, and most folk preferred to watch from behind closed doors. But a few brave souls lined Main Street, his curiosity overcoming fear. Cale stood before the small wooden church, freshly shaved and wearing his only good suit. Reverend Matthews waited beside him, nervous but determined to do his Christian duty. The man had spent the afternoon learning what he could about Apache customs, preparing a ceremony that might honor both traditions. Tobias and his wife Mary flanked them, along with Doc Peterson and schoolmar Miss Jenny, the few townspeople, willing to stand as witnesses. Their presence meant more to Cale than he could express. You sure about this? Tobias asked one final time. Cale nodded, his eyes fixed on the desert road. Never been more sure of anything in my life. The sound of horses reached them first, then the soft chiming of silver ornaments. Ayana rode between her father and Elder Itzel, her back straight, with dignity, despite the curious stares of the white faces watching from windows and doorways. She'd never seen Cale in formal clothes before. The black suit transformed him from rugged rancher to something approaching nobility.
Ow.
Though his calloused hands and sun-weathered face spoke of honest work and open skies, Chief Nalnish dismounted first, helping his daughter down with gentle hands. The ceremonial exchange began with ancient words in Apache, then English translations that rang across the silent street. I bring my daughter to you, Nalnish said formally. Her life is your responsibility now. Will you accept this sacred debt? I will, Cale replied, his voice carrying clearly in the still air. Elder Itzel stepped forward with the dowry box. She comes not empty-handed, but with the wealth of 7 generations. Will you honor her lineage? I will honor it, and her with my life. The old woman smiled, the first true warmth she'd shown since arriving. She opened the box, revealing treasures that gleamed in the moonlight. The townspeople gasped at the obvious value, more wealth than most had ever seen. Then let the joining begin, Reverend Matthews said, his voice steadying as he opened his worn Bible. But before the Christian ceremony could start, Ayana stepped forward and removed the beaded necklace from her throat knot, the one she'd sent him, but an even more precious one, made by her own hands over long months of hope and fear. She placed it around Cale's neck, her fingers brushing his skin. The touch sent electricity through both of them, and the watching crowd saw how their eyes locked, how the rest of the world seemed to disappear. Now we are bound by Apache law, she whispered, heart to heart, spirit to spirit. Then let's make it legal by white law too, he replied, taking her hands in his, under the full moon. Witnessed by two peoples learning to become one, they spoke the vows that would change their lives forever. The wedding feast lasted 3 days. Bridging to worlds with food, music, and tentative friendship, Onawa had taught Mary Morrison how to prepare traditional Apache dishes, while the white women of Copper Ridge shared their recipes in return. Cale found himself learning phrases in Apache from Chief Nalnish, while Ayanna practiced English with Reverend Matthews, but it was the nights that truly mattered. Their first evening as husband and wife, Cale led Ayanna to the small cabin he'd built with his own hands 5 years earlier. She moved through the sparse rooms like a shy deer, touching his few possessions with reverent fingers the carved wooden cross his mother had given him, the daguerreotype of his parents, the shelf of books he'd read by lamplight during long winters. It's not much, he said awkwardly, suddenly seeing his home through her eyes. It is yours, she replied simply. Now it is ours. That night they lay together on his narrow bed, not as lovers yet, but as two souls learning the rhythm of each other's breathing. She told him stories of the desert in whispered Apache, translating the beautiful words while he shared memories of the Texas plains where he'd been born. The cattle drives that had brought him west. By the second week, they'd established their own language of glances and touches. Ayanna began transforming the cabin, hanging woven rugs her grandmother had sent, arranging desert flowers in ceramic pots. The stark bachelor quarters became a home touched by feminine grace and ancient wisdom. The townspeople's initial suspicion gradually melted into curiosity. Ayanna's gentle manner and obvious devotion to her husband won over hearts, one by one. When Mrs. Henderson's baby took sick with fever, Ayanna appeared with traditional medicines that saved the child's life. When drought threatened the crops, she showed them Apache techniques for finding hidden water sources. But it was Kurik who posed the greatest threat to their happiness. The spurned warrior couldn't accept that. His promised bride now belonged to another. He began making raids on white settlers' cattle, stealing horses and leaving Apache arrows as calling cards. Each incident increased tensions between the town and the tribe, threatening the fragile peace Ayanna and Cale represented. He seeks. To force a choice, Chief Nalnish explained during one of his visits to the cabin. If he can turn your people against ours, he believes you will send Ayanna back to avoid bloodshed. Cale's jaw tightened. That won't happen. He knows this, which is why he grows more dangerous each day. The crisis came on a cool October morning. Kurik and 5 warriors surrounded the cabin while Cale was in town buying supplies. Ayanna was alone, tending her small garden, when they rode up with painted faces and raised weapons. Come with us, Kurik commanded in Apache. Your white husband cannot protect you from your own people. I am no longer your people's daughter, Ayanna replied. With quiet dignity, belonged to Cale Morrison by sacred law. Sacred law. Kurik spat. You belong to me. We were promised since children. Children's promises broken by a woman's choice. Leave this place, Kurik. You have no claim here. Rage twisted his handsome features. He dismounted, stalking toward her, with his knife drawn. If I cannot have you, no one can. Better you die Apache than live as white man's squaw. But Ayanna was no helpless victim. As he lunged, she drew the sacred cedar-handled knife from her dowry, meeting his attack with fluid grace. They circled each other like dancers, steel singing as blades met and parted. The sound of gunfire echoed across the desert as Cale came riding hard, alerted by neighbors who'd seen the war party. Arrived to find his wife bleeding from a cut on her arm, but standing victorious over Kurik's prone form. He lives, she said simply as Cale rushed to her side. But he will not trouble us again. The defeated warrior was taken back to face Chief Nalnish's judgment, while Doc Peterson tended Ayanna's wound. That night, as Cale held her close, she whispered against his chest. I would have died before letting him take me from you. You'll never have to make that choice again, he promised, sealing the vow with a kiss that tasted of forever. Spring arrived with a symphony of desert blooms and the news that changed everything. Ayanna placed Cale's weathered hand on the gentle swell of her belly, her dark eyes shining with joy and ancient wisdom. A child, she whispered in English. then repeated it in Apache. Our child. Kale's face transformed, wonder replacing the worry that had shadowed him since Kurik's attack. You're sure? The spirits whisper to me, she smiled, covering his hand with both of hers. A son, I think. He will be the bridge between our worlds. Word spread quickly through both communities. In Copper Ridge, the townspeople who had watched the unlikely couple with skeptical eyes now began to see them as symbols of hope-proof that different worlds could not only coexist, but create something beautiful together. Mary Morrison organized the churchwomen to sew baby clothes, while Doc Peterson prescribed tonics and rest. Among the Apache, Elder Itzel proclaimed the pregnancy a sign of the spirit's blessing. Chief Nalmish visited weekly, bringing gifts and wisdom, preparing to welcome his first grandson into the world. This child will know both paths, he told them one evening as they sat by the fire. Apache strength and white determination, a desert. Wisdom and settler dreams, he will be powerful. But the most meaningful moment came from an unexpected source. 6 months into her pregnancy, as Ayana worked in her expanded garden, a lone rider approached. She tensed. Recognizing Kurik, despite the respectful distance he maintained, the proud warrior had been banished for his attack. He was forced to wander the margins of Apache society. His face bore new scars, some from battle, others from the shame of his dishonor. He dismounted slowly, his hands deliberately visible and empty. Ayana of the Wind Clan, he said formally, using her maiden name with careful protocol. Kurik who walks alone, she replied, acknowledging his new status without cruelty. I come to ask forgiveness, he said, the words clearly costing him greatly. My pride blinded me to the spirit's will. You were never meant to be mine. Ayana studied his face, seeing genuine remorse beneath the prideful mask. The spirits forgive all who truly repent. I hold no anger toward you, old friend. He nodded, relief flickering in his dark eyes. Your child will be blessed, he said quietly. May he know peace we could not find. As he rode away, Ayana touched her belly where their son grew strong and sure. The circle of healing was complete. When labor came on a night when both the Apache drums and the church bells welcomed the summer solstice, the birth united both communities in vigil. Doc Peterson and Elder Itzel worked together, combining medical knowledge with traditional healing, while Kale paced between the cabin and the desert. Torn between two worlds of prayer. Daniel Nalnish Morrison entered the world at dawn, his lusty cries proclaiming him a force to be reckoned with. His eyes were his father's clear blue, but his hair was black as desert night. In his tiny face, both peoples saw their future. He will be a chief among the Apache and a leader among the whites, Elder Itzel proclaimed, placing sacred turquoise in his palm while Reverend Matthews offered Christian blessings. 5 years later, as Kale watched his son race across the desert on his spotted pony, speaking fluent Apache to his grandfather's warriors and perfect English to the children of Copper Ridge, he marveled at the path that had brought them here. Ayana joined him. On the porch they'd built together, her hand finding his with the easy grace of long marriage. 2 more children played in the garden, little Maria, who had her mother's laugh and her father's stubborn chin, and baby Joseph, whose Apache name meant brings peace. Do you ever regret it? She asked softly, watching their oldest son demonstrate. Trick riding to an admiring crowd of mixed heritage playmates, Kale turned to face his wife. This remarkable woman who had transformed not just his life, but an entire community. Her beauty had only deepened with time and motherhood, her spirit growing stronger with each challenge overcome. Regret saving the most precious thing in my life. He pulled her close, breathing in the scent of sage and wildflowers that always clung to her hair. Never. You belong to me by sacred law, remember? She laughed, the sound like silver bells in desert wind. You belong to me by choice, which is stronger than any law. As the sun set over the mesa where their love story began, painting the sky in shades of hope and promise, their children's laughter echoed across the desert. 2 worlds had become one, bound together by the simple act of one man refusing to let a woman drown. The sacred debt had been paid in full, but the love it created would last forever.